Now, the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, has reiterated his call for a ceasefire and a true solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict. In an emotional plea to the global health body's governing body, Ghebreyesus has described the condition in Gaza as hellish. This as UN judges in The Hague will this afternoon rule on South Africa's legal bid on Israel to suspend its military campaign in Gaza.
I think if we look for a solution, it's always possible. It's only the will that's required. And I'm a true believer, because of my own experience, that war doesn't bring solution, except more war, more hatred, more agony, more destruction. So let's choose peace and resolve this issue politically. But I think all of you have said the two-state solution and so on, and hope this war will end and move into a true solution. Struggling to speak because the situation is beyond words.
Let's expand on this now. Joining us is international and humanitarian law expert from Nottingham Trent University, Dr. Luigi Daniele. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. We know that by this afternoon already, the International Court of Justice would have made a decision. What are some of the very significant considerations that will need to be made in coming to a conclusion?
Thanks for having me, Paul. So first of all, I think the court will have to consider the dire and frankly indescribable situation on the ground for the civilians in Gaza. We know that at least 25,000 have been killed, but what is more shocking is that 10,000 among them were children and at least 7,000 were women. And from the remaining part, which are the adult male population, among those killed, we need to subtract all the civilians hit by bombardment. So we might be facing a scenario in which likely 80 to 90% of the victims of the military offensive are civilians. Then there is the catastrophic humanitarian situation that you were underlining before. Imagine that the World Food Programme has said that 80% of people in the world already on the brink of famine are now in Gaza. There is also the amount of people and children injured, maimed, mutilated, facing a situation of almost complete lack of possibilities of medical care. The World Health Organization has registered 2 weeks ago more than 600 attacks on medical facilities. So, facing this situation, the court will have to consider the requirements for provisional measures. These requirements are, first of all, the existence of a prima facie, first-glance jurisdiction, then a link between the measure requested by South Africa and the rights claimed and the protection claimed in the application itself, and then a plausibility of the claim of the South African legal team, alongside the risk of irreparable prejudice and harm for the population in Gaza, alongside urgency. So these are the facts and the law that the court will need to consider.
In your view, would you say South Africa's made a case that would persuade the ICJ that it needed to indicate the provisional measures to urgently address the potential irreparable harm faced by Palestinians in Gaza?
Thanks, Paul. Personally, I have found the arguments of the application compelling, and this is not just my view. If you look at the debate between international lawyers in the human rights community, the application argued with compelling facts that given the ongoing indiscriminate hostilities, it is even impossible to deliver humanitarian aid to those that are in higher need of it. So, from this point of view, the request of a provisional measure ordering the cessation of hostilities is compellingly argued, as well as the request to rescind, to cancel all the military orders of total siege responsible of intentionally pushing more than 2 million of civilians to the brink of famine, thirst, and diseases and lethal epidemics. So from this point of view, of course, I think the judges have serious material to order these measures to save the lives of thousands and thousands of Palestinian civilians that are still being killed in horrific proportions. The only problem will be that formally provisional measures are only binding for the state to which they are addressed. So the cessation of hostilities, some observers said, and the Israeli legal team said, would unilaterally bind Israel. However, I think that this can be easily circumvented by the judges, conditioning this order to the lack of new armed attack from the Palestinian side. And it has to be noted that yesterday Reuters shared the news in which Hamas affirmed that would abide by a cessation of hostility order of the ICJ if Israel does so, and consequently affirmed the availability of the armed group to a full deal for the release of all the hostages if Israel releases all the prisoners.
And before we let you go very quickly, how much gravitas would you say the ICJ holds? Because we know that it previously granted an order for Russia to stop its military operation in Ukraine after Ukraine accused President Putin's administration of seeking to justify its destructions by claiming that its people were Nazis. Putin ignored that ruling. So that in itself, would want to beg the question of the authority of the ICJ.
Yes, we must note that from the legal point of view, the orders of provisional measures are immediately binding, but as you underlined, there is no agency for the execution at supranational level of provisional measures. However, even in itself, an order of provisional measure means that the judges consider plausible the claims of South Africa, and thus the risk that the unfolding genocide produces all its consequences. And from this point of view, we are talking of a convention imposing on states erga omnes partes obligations to prevent. So, in itself, this finding of plausibility of genocide would put, in particular, states that have strong political links and economical links with the Israeli government in a risky position of failing to discharge their obligations to prevent.
Yeah.
So, even if there is...
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. That, of course, was Dr. Luigi Daniel, international and humanitarian law expert, speaking to South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Of course.